All right, so here I am in New York. LeiLani Cauthen, CEO of Learning Counsel, News, Media, and Research. We've had a thrilling day so far, right?
Absolutely. Excellent.
Yes, excellent. All right, so let me introduce you to who's who over here for the people that will be watching the video later and our audience today. Thank you guys all for being here. I have with me Dr. James Kaishian, who's the superintendent of schools, Briancliff Manor schools. Okay. Yep. And then also Dr. Jeremy Luft, superintendent of schools, Putnam Valley School District. Yes. Thank you for being the volunteer earlier.
You got it.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And Dr. Colin Byrne, did I say that right?
You did.
Dr. Colin Byrne, superintendent of schools, blind Brook-Rye Union Free School District. Don't ask me to say that 3 times fast. I will totally screw that up. All right, so we're going to be sort of trading this back and forth, okay, so everybody can hear us. So I want to start out with saying, we want to talk about the issues of model, okay? We're in a moment. We have a teacher shortage. We've got massive absences at the rate of 25% and increasing. We've got a non-homogeneous population of students with immigration, and we've got some dropping test scores, and maybe not necessarily with your districts, but we've got a lot of issues. So we talked a little bit about model and how you model, which is different than programs, right? Like I'm going to run a STEM program, I'm going to run a literacy program, I'm going to train all my teachers on my new devices or whatever I got. We're talking about model. Let's talk first about our thoughts on maybe model constraints, trying to innovate. Let's talk about that first. Are you okay with that, you guys?
Sure.
Okay. Colin, and you first.
Okay. We had a lot of good conversations today, and I think I gave out all my good answers earlier, but I'll try to be okay now. Unfortunately, as a superintendent, you often go to the negatives, and a lot of what we talked about was some great thinking about changing education. But the first thing that comes up are the roadblocks, the things that you're going to have to change. There's a lot of community perception that you're going to have to deal with and overcome to make any changes. There are internal things you have to do with unions, and there's legal pieces. So to me, I see that if you're really going to change your modeling, the way you approach, you have to really have a holistic plan that takes into account all these pieces. And you really have to chip away at it slowly and methodically. You have to really work with all your resources in district, out of district, to try to make sure everybody understands what the change you're looking to do is and gets on board and supports it to move things forward.
Good answer. I'm going with that one. I do want to say what I like about what you just said is you're thinking of a matrix. You're no longer thinking, I'm a guy who's running some people in their boxed off rooms in a building.
Oh, you can't.
Bunch of building. No, you're thinking wider than that. You're beyond the building. Thank you for being that. All right, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
So, thank you. When I think about modeling, I'm really thinking about a model in which teachers really learn from each other. And I know I have some of the most fantastic, talented teachers, and my newer teachers, even some of my senior teachers, have so much they could learn from each other. And I really believe strongly in that model. So I think as superintendents, really what our goal is to create systems in which we engage and empower those lead teachers to be willing to share their craft and knowledge with their colleagues, and really to sort of build your strength internally. Obviously, we always welcome consultants to come in, but that oftentimes is a short-term solution. And I think by using our own teacher leaders and creating structures in district, we create an environment where that support is continually there and it's provided by their colleagues. So it removes the fear of an administrator or a consultant or someone coming into your classroom, and it really creates an environment in which it's about support and professional growth and having a friendly face in there, and it really comes with a sense of street credit, right? This is what I do in my classroom, and this is why it works, as opposed to an outsider perspective coming in and telling you how things should work in your classroom.
I like that too. That's like a family, is what you just gave us a little picture of. Yeah, like everybody has a role, and they share, and their family, and they come together maybe at the dining table, and yeah, I like this a lot. Yeah, I like it. All right, Jim.
Yeah, and I really agree with Jeremy in terms of this notion that you want to develop internal expertise and tap into that expertise, because they do have the street cred, they do have an understanding of the culture. Although school districts are generally similar in our region, every district is has idiosyncrasies and differences in culture, school culture. So you have people who are involved with the system. They do have the street cred and have the experience in the classroom that gets the attention of their teachers. So I'm the modeling I'm talking about is I think we're accustomed to top-down management and making sure that from the district level we know what teachers need to master, and turning that on its head and trying to come up with a way of organically eliciting from our faculty what they need and then providing it. We have an interesting saying in my district, and that's, we're going to push you. This is a hard place to work. The standards are high, but we're going to support you and provide you with what you need, right? And it's not just the tools and materials for the classroom, but it's the professional development. So what is it that you need? And so you feeling very comfortable about looking teachers in the eye and say, okay, you're asking me to do that, this is what we need. And often it's professional development, and professional development provided by people who have an expertise and people whom they respect. So initially maybe bringing in some people from the outside, but turnkeying that instructional approach, making sure that we have teachers in our district who then can go out and sustain that level of training and engagement and professional development.
Yeah, it's sort of a matrix view, like Colin was saying.
Yep.
I like that. All right, so the next thing is like what we've seen from the research that 40-some% of the teachers have figured out that they can't really compete with the global internet for all knowledge everywhere, and they're sort of moving away from I'm the source of knowledge, I'm the lecturer, I tell, and they're moving towards defining themselves more as a facilitator and guide, which in my mind is sort of also the direction of let's not whole group our way to glory, let's start small grouping and even one-to-one direct instruction more, which is hard, okay? So we've also found that administrators define what a teacher is very differently than what the teachers are now defining themselves as being. And I don't know how you run an organization where what you think they're doing is different than what they think they're doing. So I want to talk about the leadership of defining teaching in the present age. Should we go round robin again? You want to do that? All right, you're up.
Yeah, so this is something, and we have seen some movement, not total movement, but definitely some movement of teachers from that, the whole stage on the stage to a more guide on the side mode. Not totally, but really it's working, I think, with the teachers to really help them understand. The big shift is, you're not there to teach, you're there to help our students learn. And if you can get that conceptual change, then you'll see in the classroom the adjustment that the teacher makes mentally in terms of, I'm not just here to relate this, I'm here to help you progress. We've seen some movement in that. I've seen some movement in that. It's a big switch for a lot of people, but I think that's one of the core pieces about really looking at the responsibilities of teachers, really getting to reframe the purpose of what they're doing. Even I've seen districts go to the extent of relabeling everything in terms of learning. Even their administrative positions have gone in specialists of learning rather than instruction and those kind of things. So I think it's a big perceptual change that has to take place.
Thank you. Okay, good. Jeremy.
So for me, I think it ultimately comes down to two words. It comes down to engagement and empowerment. And I think we need to engage the right parties into these conversations to set those expectations regarding what we expect to see when we visit classrooms, what we expect to see in terms of student performance, and how we plan on supporting teachers through that. And then empowerment has to be a willingness to hear what the teachers think about it, right? So we can engage them in the conversations, but if we're not willing to elicit their feedback and have them have some say in what this should look like and what we should be looking for, then I think we're going to have very little return on our investment. So I think ultimately it's sort of reaching those common expectations through both engagement and empowerment of our teachers. And then now you've ensured everybody is moving forward with a common vision, common goals. And now when you go into the classroom, the teacher knows what you're looking for, and the administrator knows what they're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
So we had some interesting conversations about where the world is today, and we talked a little bit in our last group about, hey, there's probably nothing that is worth knowing you couldn't Google and find out, right? So if that's the reality out there, when we're looking at our learning objectives and standards, it's got to be less content-based. It's got to be more dispositional. It's got to be more skill development. And so if you're looking at dispositions and skills, it frees teachers up to be able to individualize the instruction according to students' needs. So when you're in the classroom, I walk around in my school district, for example, I can confidently say that there's a lot of facilitation going on. But that's not, just like we said when we handed out our laptops, hey, if it works for you, use it. Sometimes direct instruction works in this situation. So it's really about teachers being able to make decisions in their classroom at the local level, being provided with the professional staff development to need, and the license to be creative with regard to the exit outcomes. We focus very much, we are in the process of reviewing our 5-year strategic plan with a focus on the dispositions, skills and dispositions we want for our graduates. We're talking about creative, we're talking about complex problem solving, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about things like creativity, we're talking about things like personal agency, right? If those things are important to the school district, then you know what? The projects can be much more individualized. Project-based learning can take over. And just one other small anecdote. We experimented several years ago. We were having trouble finding substitute teachers, right? I think everybody's doing so. We gave up trying to find substitute teachers. Why fight the fight? And when we did find them, it's probably where all the discipline matters were happening, right? So we gave up on substitute teachers. We sent our kids to the cafeteria. We call it substation. Teachers prepare lessons, and students engage because they have the technology, they have the devices. And often it's a long-term project or a project-based project that the kids are working on. I've had multiple conversations with kids where I ask them, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm working on this project. Well, what's the person? Well, they're working on their project. It's a different project. It's different. We pick, our own goals. The issue is, and that's wonderful, and that's a glimpse of what's possible when you talk about moving away from whole group down to the individualized level. But what's missing is a human element. And I think this meeting today is all about how we leverage technology to try to ensure that human element is a part of the education program. And that's over the next horizon. I can't quite see how we get there, but I know technology is involved.
Thank you for that. All right, so I want to talk next about sort of leadership issues, right? So what we're seeing all over the country as we roll into town is that there's a lot of community unrest. What's coming up so far on our 2023 survey, and if we come back here next year, we'll share the full data, is that there's curriculum wars going on. There's why are you doing it this way? There's why can't an app show me my students' test scores right, like within instantaneous moments after they took the test? There's just an expectation, right? And post-pandemic, there's nuanced new expectations that we never really ran into before from a leadership perspective. So you're caught between what one superintendent told us, which is, no matter what I do, is that 50% of the people are going to hate me and 50% of the people are going to love me, and I have to lead through that. So let's talk about that leadership issue, like how you do that. Like what are your sort of mental machinations where you say, well, I still got to run the show? Go ahead, Colin.
So that is something we all face. Hopefully you're not at 50-50. Hopefully you're a little bit better than that.
Yeah.
With support versus complaints. And I think we all know that we have the squeaky wheels who dominate most of our time. How I navigate that is really just focusing on what's important. We did do a strategic coherence plan 2 years ago. That helps guide us in our work. We have goals that we set every year in collaboration with our board, with our community, with our teachers, Really just trying to focus on what's right for the students. That's the bottom line. And you just have to accept the fact that some people are advocating for what they believe is best for their child, but we have to advocate what we know is best for all children.
Well said. I like that. All right. So, Jeremy.
Well, I was enjoying Colin go first until he stole my answer.
You can say it again, it's fine.
So, no, I think you brought up a very valid point. Child first and foremost is our vision in Putnam Valley, and despite the fact that at any given time 50% of the community may disagree with me, as long as I could explain to them why this is good for students and go back to that vision, I feel as if I'm doing my behalf for the students that we serve. Along the strategic planning, we did very similar. So we have our core values that really guide all of our work, and it works the same way in terms of bringing back all of the things we do to why this is good for students. And it's maybe the one last piece that I would add on there is really the necessity for engagement of parents and community. And while people may have very differing opinions, I think it's our duty as superintendents to take the time to hear all of those perspectives, to make them understand what our rationale is for the decisions we make, to engage and empower them in these conversations and find opportunities for them to say what they want to say, and then also be part of the process for where do we go from here. And I think that's something we've seen a huge increase in the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, is finding opportunities to get parents into the buildings, to make them part of conversations. And while I'm very clear that all of these are an advisory, right, because ultimately it's going to be my decision, I certainly will take their opinions into advisement. And I think one of the most powerful things that comes out of these meetings are, and it's how we started, half the parents want one thing, half the parents want another. There's nothing more valuable than being in one of these meetings with a room full of parents who are engaged and empowered in a conversation and watching half of the room debate with the other half of the room as to what is best for their children, and then they quickly realize that there's not one correct answer, because what one half of the room believes may not be with the other, and ultimately that's why we as educators make the decisions that we think are in the best interest of all students. So it's a very powerful moment if you get there and let parents hear directly from other parents that there's not one size fits all answers to these questions.
Nice.
Yeah, and so part of, I believe our mission is to get on the balcony and take a look at the horizon and use our moral compass to kind of understand what direction we're going to go in, right? If you start with that perspective, and you know, I think that can make the challenge actually something that's rewarding, and it is a challenge being an educational leader today. But more than listening to the crowd, the jeers and the cheers from the crowd and trying to gauge where you are, it really is about active engagement and active listening. So you engage the stakeholders, and if you listen long enough, we've had in my district, you know, book banning and challenges to curriculum and things like that. But if I honestly engage individual people who are concerned about those things, I find that it's really something else. It's really not a novel. It's really not the curriculum. It's really some kind of inner concern, fear, maybe misunderstanding. And sometimes we won't agree. But I find it to be a very rewarding challenge that when somebody questions why are we doing it, I take the time to sit down and write out my response and think about it. Does this resonate with me? Am I making excuses? Am I putting this person off? Or is this really something I really think is in the best interests of children, right? Am I really fulfilling my mission as educator? Am I following my moral compass in terms of what is right and wrong? And so often, I was in many ways, exhausted because there was a lot of work. I was invigorated by the COVID pandemic in terms of the decision-making process that we placed. I'm invigorated today that there are people out there who we never heard from before, and maybe they've always had these opinions, are now questioning what we're doing, and it gives us an opportunity to engage and provide an answer that may not satisfy the individuals, but certainly goes a long way to ensuring that the broader community understands why and has respect and appreciation for what we're doing.
I appreciate that answer. That was very well thought out. All right, so I think we're near our moment. We have just a few more minutes left. And when we put up the video, we like it to be only about 30 minutes long anyway, because that's what people will watch these days. All right, so does the audience have any questions that you're just dying to know the answer of?
I'm wondering in what ways your approaches to collective bargaining agreements might be shifting in this terrain.
So she asked, what ways might your collective bargaining agreements be shifting during these times,
Your
right?
approach to it.
Your approach to it. Any thoughts, anybody?
I mean, I would say our approach generally hasn't changed. We've always worked to try to be fair with the groups that we're working with. There are financial concerns that you have to consider, but no different than any other round of bargaining. There's always something going on. So in my experience, we just settled 2 contracts last year. We're working on the one this year. The one big thing that, at least feedback that I've gotten, is the conversations have been much more amicable and respectful, which is great. I hope that can continue, and otherwise it seems pretty similar from my perspective.
Yeah, so an interesting moment too for that across all industries. Right? We have a shortage of people nationally, and we're seeing a lot of effects of that as we look at the research, what's going on in other industries.